You're listening to the Bear in Mind Podcast, episode 111.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Vias.
Managing your time during the holidays. That kind of sounds like an oxymoron. Like those two things don't go together. Now, I have 3 tips. And you can search for so many tips about how to manage your time during the holidays on the internet. And I have 3 tips for you that you have probably heard about, but there's a little surprise at the end because it isn't really going to be about the 3 tips that I give you. These three tips are amazing if you're going to follow them. And I'm going to throw in something that ends up happening with time management when we try to manage our time during the holidays, or even when we try to manage our time in other periods of our life. So whether you have activities planned or whether you're on your own for the holidays, these 3 tips are going to be so helpful in understanding time in your life. So it doesn't matter what you have going on. They are amazing things that when I forget to do them, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back and do that. And I even forgot to do one of them last week. And the first tip is set an end time. So if you're going to somebody's place for dinner, a party, you set a time that you are going to leave. If you are hosting a party, a dinner, whatever, and you communicate that the dinner's going to end at set time. So you're having a dinner, you invite people over, let's say from 6 in the evening, and you say it's going to go until 10 or 11 at night. And when you communicate that, you're communicating that that's when the festivities are going to end. And it's a really great way to see what you start to think about when it comes to time management and how you feel about that tip. And if you don't like that tip, I got another one. The second one is plan 1 activity per day. And this goes for even if you're on your own, even if you have this break, this time off of work, and you're not doing anything with anybody, still plan 1 activity per day. It does not have to be big. It can be cleaning out your closet. It could be cleaning your bathroom. And if you have a lot of things planned with family, I still recommend to plan that 1 activity per day. So if you're going to the grandparents' house, that's the 1 activity for the day. There's no, and we're going to do this, and we're going to run here, and we're going to do this. Stick to one thing that day. If you're hosting, that's what you're doing that day. You're hosting that party, you're prepping the party, and then you're hosting it in the evening. And then the next day, it's only one thing. The next day might be clean up or not. Maybe you're not going to clean up the next day. It's only one thing. And the third tip that I have is to plan in rest time. And this is a very common thing, to plan in that time of rest during the holidays, even though it seems like we have this time off of work, that we still need to actually plan in the rest. It takes a lot of effort to show up to somewhere. It takes a lot of effort to do some of these things that we want to do during the holidays, but we still need to rest from them. Even the fun stuff, even the gathering with the friends, our brains still need to relax from it. And so I recommend planning it in, saying, okay, this morning I'm going to do nothing, sit in my PJs, drink my tea, and read a book, or whatever it is you want to do. This rest time is whatever it is you want to do. There's nothing. It's not about going to work out. It's whatever it is to stare at the wall. So I said that there's a bonus. So a lot of times when you read these tips, either in a podcast or an article on the internet, we don't usually do them. Do you ever notice that? I didn't do number 1. I had a party and I forgot to communicate the end time. I usually do that, and this time I forgot to, and it went over longer than I wanted it to, because then at the end of it ended up being a lot later for me than I wanted. So it can be, in changing something, trying to incorporate a new habit, we get all these tips and then we think, okay, these sound great. I'm going to do it. Maybe they even sound simple. And then we don't end up doing it. And so when you hear tips like this, pick one and see how it goes. So during this holiday period, whichever one of the three that I said, one is set an end time to an activity, plan one activity per day, and plan in your rest. Pick one of those to focus on. And here's what I want you to do. It's not about actually doing that tip. So for the week of the holidays, see if you actually do that. Choosing the tip, okay, you're going to do tip number 2, and see what happens at the end of the week. See if you do it or if you don't do it. That is going to be so much more revealing than sitting here listening to my 3 tips or reading an article and saying, okay, I'm going to do these. These sound really great. And then doing absolutely nothing. So the only thing is decide right now which one of the 3 tips that you're going to do during the holidays, and then see how the week goes. If you have 2 weeks off, see how the 2 weeks goes, and see if you end up doing it or if you don't do it. And I'm going to do a follow-up episode in the next episode. I believe it's the next episode. It's going to be in 2 episodes about what happens, what that information will tell you about how you can better manage your time. Because there's so many tips out there. There's so many great tips. I even went on there and I looked at them. I'm like, oh, some of them are very similar to mine. Some of them I do. Some of them are great. Whenever we're trying to improve something with our time, especially around our time, whenever we're trying to improve something, we often feel like we need to do all of it, and then we do none of it. And then if we decide to do one thing, if we don't do it, then we end up kind of beating ourselves up for it. Oh, I didn't do that one thing. And I'm going to come back. So it's kind of a little bit of a accountability here. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about what happens if you did it, and then if you didn't do it, because that is the information that you actually need. That is going to get you the habits that you actually want to change. It's not about whether you pass or fail and did all the 3 tips or whatever article you read, doing all the tips on there. It's not actually about that, which is kind of funny, right? It's not about whether you do even one of the tips. It's what happens at the end of the week. What did you learn if you did one of the tips? What did you learn if you didn't do anything? And that's what I'm going to bring up. And I'm going to go through kind of what happens at the end of this week whenever we read something and we get these great tips. What happens in our mind usually? I'm going to go through kind of the common things that happen, because it happens in me and it happens with the clients that I work with, and what comes up. And so that's all I have for you this week. I'm going to check back with you next for sure, right?
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.